I'm George Dondero with the Santa Cruz County Regional Transportation Commission. I'll be your host today on RTC's Transportation Café, a quarterly program focused on local transportation issues. Today joining me will be Supervisor from District 5, Mark Stone, and also current Chair of the Regional Transportation Commission, and Luiz Mendez, Deputy Director at the Commission as well, and Project Manager on the acquisition of the branch rail line. So let's start with you, Mark. What do you think is the importance of acquiring this 32-mile corridor?
Well, we think of it today as a rail corridor, but really it's a transportation corridor. It's been providing transportation in Santa Cruz County for well over 130 years. And it's used primarily for rail these days and also casually for some bicycle and some pedestrian transportation. But what it ultimately represents is a fabulous opportunity for many modes of transportation on a course that parallels Highway 1. As we know, that's our main route in Santa Cruz County, north-south route that we have that most people use. So being able to add the flexibility of rail, flexibility potentially of bicycle, pedestrian along many segments there gives us an exciting opportunity. And I'll just put it in a little bit of perspective. I represent the San Lorenzo Valley, so an issue that's a little bit closer to home. You can see on old maps where the rail line went between Felton and Boulder Creek. And it's frustrating to see what a beautiful opportunity that would have been had it not been given over to landowners. So we're at a place where for the future generations, we won't say, well, if only, because we had given up that opportunity in the San Lorenzo Valley. Now this is a dream realized. So, Luis, can you tell us what some of the key features are of the property?
Yes. The rail line is about 32 miles long from the Pajaro Junction. That's in North Monterey County, just on the other side of the Monterey-Santa Cruz County line from Watsonville, all the way up to Davenport. And as it travels those 32 miles, it goes through most of the attractions in Santa Cruz County. It goes by about over 80 parks, about 45 schools, over 50% of the population in Santa Cruz County lives within 1 mile of that rail line. And it's an operating rail line. It's been in operation for over 130 years with some sort of freight or passenger service. Currently, there's a little bit of freight, not a whole lot, since the Cemex cement plant closed. That reduced significantly. And there's also some passenger service right now, some excursion passenger service on a small section of it, about a mile section of it, where the Big Trees rail line brings their train from Felton down to the boardwalk. So they use about a mile of that line to get to the boardwalk.
So what is the current status of the acquisition, and what happens next, Mark?
Well, after sort of 20 years of dreaming and the vision of acquiring this corridor and putting it to some use, and 10 years of negotiating with UP, it's been a long time. We are right now on the verge of being able to close the deal. Everything's negotiated. Money we've found and we're able to successfully garner from the California Transportation Commission. What we're waiting on is the close of escrow. I think most people understand that term. All the documents are in it. The money is in escrow. And we're waiting now for the feds to finally approve the deal. Because the feds operate on their own schedule, we're not quite sure. Probably, hopefully, end of April, early May, the deal will finally close and be in the hands of the people of Santa Cruz County. Then what happens? It really is up to the Regional Transportation Commission and the people of Santa Cruz. We have an operating rail line along there that'll be operating freight and some passenger in the form of excursion rail. Some segments will be able to be used potentially in the future as rail segments, bicycle, pedestrian. We could even in the future see other kinds of passenger service on there. In fact, our commitment to the California Transportation Commission was, as you know, for passenger service along this line. But all of that is subject to planning. We have yet to figure out what that will be, and that will be a discussion to have with the community. How do we as Santa Cruz County in our region want to work with this rail line? How do we want to see it used? How can we best utilize this incredible resource for our benefit and the benefit of the generations to come?
And I understand there's a commemoration being planned, although the date is not known yet because we don't know what date escrow will close.
That's correct. Once escrow closes, and then we legally can get on without having to get permission from UP. I'm looking forward to a commemoration and celebrating this acquisition and getting it into our hands. And hopefully we'll be able to run a train up the line, give people a chance to see where it goes, connect in their community with a little bit of celebration, and start to put it to use.
So where did the money come from to buy this line?
The money came from a couple of different places primarily. There was some federal money involved, but mostly it's state money and then Prop 116 money. As you know, Prop 116 was passed in California a number of years ago, well, a couple of decades ago, to set aside money for rail. There was an allocation for Santa Cruz County. We're using that allocation. We're also using some state transportation dollars that are, again, allocated to Santa Cruz County. That's what the Regional Transportation Commission does, is figure out how we want to spend the state and federal monies that come to us for transportation purposes. A long time ago, these monies were allocated. And we did have to go up to the CTC to get permission from the state, the California Transportation Commission, to spend basically our own money. And that was approved on a very significant vote. It was 10-1. We would have liked it to have been unanimous, but it was very close. And the meeting itself was probably one of the most interesting, bizarre public meetings I'd been to. One of the commissioners, California Transportation Commissioner Taglioni, negotiated right there in the meeting with UP and got them to drop their price. I've never seen that happen before. He called them up to the dais a couple of times and said, I want you to put some money on the table. Now, he's being very clever because some of the commissioners clearly wanted to probably give us permission to have this money, but weren't quite sure about the amount they wanted to give us. Taglioni did reduce the amount, but in such a way as to make sure that the vote was going to be successful. So when he called UP up and he says, what money are you going to put on the table? Did you bring your checkbook, I think was a question that he asked them. And interesting kind of question to ask, but I certainly had no expectation that UP was going to change the negotiated amount that we had negotiated in good faith with UP. Taglioni said, it looks like we're about $650,000 away from where the commission, the California Transportation Commission, wanted to approve the money. So he said, UP, drop your price by $650,000. Well, they eventually remarkably agreed to drop it by $400,000. And at that point, as chair of the commission, I stepped forward and said, commissioners, we'll take that deal. And I did go make sure I shook hands with the UP rep there to make sure we had solidified that, not quite knowing what they would ultimately do, but they made good on that. They dropped their price, $400,000 that they put on the table, leaving us to reprogram the additional $250 to make up that $650. Now the state feels that they were saving the state money, and they weren't. They actually saved us money because it was our money to spend. So the $400,000, we did go through the action of reprogramming the $250,000 and pulled that out of some federal allocations that was coming to us. The $400,000 though is STIP money that we can then ask for, is surface transportation or state transportation improvement program money that we can then ask for yet again. So projects like streets and roads, other things that will be important to people, we have $400,000 we can now go use of basically our own money. Yes, we have to go to the California Transportation Commission to ask for that to be programmed, but that's a very different calculation now that we have the line.
Yes, that was an interesting meeting. So there's also some money set aside for repair costs, basically for the bridges and structures on the line. So where does that money come from?
Well, there's a little bit of engineering money that was in this original allocation. There's a little over $14 million that were approved by the California Transportation Commission. Now, again, we had set aside a total of almost $20 million of this combination of rail money, the Prop 116 money, and our state transportation improvement money. So we'll be going back to the California Transportation Commission once we know what the repairs need to be and ask, again, for our own money, the monies that our local representatives from the Regional Transportation Commission, as everyone may know, is essentially made up of local electeds from the county and from each of the cities that sit on it, as well as representatives from our metro. So we have decided that we're going to use some of our state transportation dollars to do the whole project, which includes upgrade to some of the trestles. If anybody's walked that line, you know some of the trestles are in interesting states of repair or disrepair. Right. And in order to be able to run passenger service on it eventually, we're going to need to make those safe, first of all, and then potentially upgrade them. So we'll be going back to the California Transportation Commission for money that has been programmed locally, but we'll still need to go to the state for permission.
Okay. So you mentioned making the bridges safe for passenger, but they also have to be safe for freight business. And well, Luis, can you tell us, will the freight business continue on that line, and why?
Oh, yes, the freight business will definitely continue on the line. As I said earlier, there isn't very much freight business right now, but the current operator, Sierra Northern Railway, they're currently providing the freight service under a lease agreement with Union Pacific. And once the Regional Transportation Commission owns the line, they will have an agreement with the Regional Transportation Commission to continue that freight service. And Sierra Northern Railway is very interested in continuing that freight service because it's part of the economics equation of the rail line for them. So they do get some revenue from the freight service, and then from any future excursion service that they plan to operate on the rail line as well, they get some additional revenue. So a combination of having the freight service continue as well as the new recreational rail service will help them to be able to keep the line operation, maintain it to a level that will allow at least some basic level of service. And also, because Sierra Railroad is, or Sierra Northern Railway is very interested in continuing the freight service, they did apply to a federal agency, the Surface Transportation Board, to be the common carrier on the rail line. So as the common carrier, they do have that responsibility of continuing freight service. Now, if for some reason in the future that freight service didn't pan out economically, they could go back to the Surface Transportation Board and said, we shouldn't be the common carrier anymore because there isn't enough freight service.
So what you're saying is the RTC is not the common carrier, it's Sierra Northern Railway.
That is correct. The RTC will be the owner, but under agreement with Sierra, and Sierra will be the common carrier and will be the one responsible for continuing freight service as long as it's feasible to do so.
So you already mentioned a few of the potential uses in the near term, but looking further out, what do you see as some of the potential uses of the line?
Supervisor Stone mentioned one of the commitments to the California Transportation Commission was to have some sort of passenger service on the line. And the Regional Transportation Commission plans to implement a recreational passenger rail service between Santa Cruz and Davenport. So that's, I guess, maybe a little longer term, because it'll be, I don't know if it'll be immediate, but it'll take maybe a year, a couple of years, maybe 3 years to get it in place. But in the meantime, the freight rail service will continue. There are also plans for looking at the possibility of some sort of trail along the rail line where it could be accommodated within the right-of-way while still having the railroad tracks there to use for any sort of freight or passenger rail service.
So can you tell us a little bit more about Sierra Northern's experience? I mean, they're sort of a new player on the scene. They've done some of these things before other places.
Yeah. Well, they're a new player on the scene here in Santa Cruz County, but they do have other operations elsewhere in the state. They have 3 other recreational rail services. They have one that runs out of Oakdale, their Sierra Railroad dinner train that's been in operation, I believe, since 1999. And also they have the skunk train up in Mendocino County. They purchased that, I can't remember exactly when it was, but probably about 7-8 years ago, and they've been running the skunk train excursion service up there. They also have the Sacramento River train that they operate. So they do have a track record of successful excursion operations, and so now they do plan to also have an excursion operation here in Santa Cruz County from Santa Cruz up towards Davenport.
So earlier you mentioned the bicycle and pedestrian trail. Can you tell us more about that, how that will work, and the planning phase of that and so on?
Okay. Well, the Regional Transportation Commission has set aside some funds thanks to Congressman Sam Farr, who's been able to secure some federal earmarks for this work. And those funds will be used for planning, producing what's known as a master plan for the Monterey Bay Sanctuary Scenic Trail Network. I know that's a big, long name, but essentially is a network of trails that would go along the coast, probably with one primary trail that then will connect to existing trails or new trails being developed. So it could connect to the San Lorenzo Levee Trail, it could connect to the slough trails down in Watsonville. And as part of that planning process, it will look at using the rail line right-of-way for segments of that trails network.
So there are places where the right-of-way is too narrow, or the topography might not allow a trail to go right next to the railroad.
That is correct. Some places may be too narrow.
Right.
And so for this reason, through the planning process, it will look at that, whether you can accommodate a trail there. And the Regional Transportation Commission already has a consultant on board to do that work. I think the commission is finalizing the contract as we speak, pretty much. And so as soon as the Regional Transportation Commission owns the rail line, then as Supervisor Stone mentioned, we can actually legally get on the rail line and start doing some of this work without having to ask Union Pacific for permission. So. Now
this trail is going to, or some of these trails are going to link up with similar trails in Monterey County, is that correct?
That is correct. Monterey County has already gone through a process of planning for this Monterey Bay Sanctuary Scenic Trail network, and they're already working on some segments of their trail, and the trail in Santa Cruz County will connect Monterey County so that you could go from basically the San Mateo, Santa Cruz County line potentially all the way down to I think it's Lover's Point down in Monterey County. So.
And I understand this trail is the vision of Congressman Sam Farr. He's been nurturing this idea along for a number of years, and it's finally coming to fruition.
That's correct.
Yeah. So Mark, what kind of connectivity could evolve with this rail line for residents of this county in the future, in the longer term? What possibilities are out there in the longer term? What's your vision of that?
Well, that's the exciting part. And for me, every school kid in California learns about or really in the nation learns about the Golden Spike when they put the rail line for the first time together between the East and the West. And there was this great ceremony, and they pounded a Golden Spike representing that connectivity. This acquisition, to me, is our Golden Spike, but not just rail. It does represent possibility for rail, near-term, existing freight rail, near-term excursion trains for passengers, but long-term, it allows us to even talk about real passenger service between South County and North County. In the meantime, as Luis had mentioned, the Monterey Bay Marine Sanctuary Scenic Trail that Congressman Farr has been working on, the notion is a trail network that follows around and lets people have some interaction with the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary, but also will connect with, as you had said, the trail systems that are already in existence and already planned. So being able to walk up and down our coast, in fact, is a much broader vision of many folks, and there are plans in the works for a California coastal trail running the 1,100 miles of California's coast. This will link into that. It will link into other bicycle and pedestrian trails that we have, as well as providing potentially real rail service. That's where we need to get people involved in this for the future. I get asked all the time now, well, now that we have acquired the system, can I take my family on the trail this Sunday and go between here and Watsonville? Well, no, not quite yet. In fact, the trail segments that are going to get built, the trail segments that get built in other parts of the county that will be a part of this network, all have yet to be planned. We've got some money available for it, but mostly we need people to help us with the planning of how this corridor gets used, where the trail systems are going to connect through. I would love to see trail systems not just along this sort of north-south connectivity of the county, but then spread into the other parts of the community. The Nicene to the Sea Trail has been talked about a long time. Trail systems up the San Lorenzo Valley to those communities up there have been talked about a long time. This is a singular unifying event, opens up all of those possibilities. It's an exciting time that we're in, and I certainly look forward to the continuing planning and the conversation that we're having with the community here in Santa Cruz County to talk about what we can do near term, what our long-term visions are for this rail line, and how we can put it to best use.
And that includes connecting to future planned rail service in Monterey County as well, correct?
It does. They're talking about that as well. And through the Pajaro station, we could connect with potentially the Capital Corridor, Caltrain that runs up the peninsula, connect with rail passenger service or potentially excursion service, depending on how it works, down into Monterey, points east, north, south. It really is going to be a main part of Santa Cruz County's, our region's transportation hub and transportation network, from rail standpoint, bicycle standpoint, pedestrian standpoint. All the possibilities are out there for us now once we get to that point of owning it on behalf of the people of Santa Cruz County.
Wow, some very exciting things in the future for this county.
Definitely.
Well, thank you both. So our listeners may be wondering how they can plug into all this, and our first suggestion is to go to the RTC's website, www.sccrtc.org, and you can sign up to get email news on any program or project that we are working on, but specifically the rail program. You can get updates on that. And certainly you'll want to check to see when we get the date set for the closing of escrow, because after that there will be celebrations at least 2 locations in the county. So thank you today for joining us on RTC's Transportation Cafe, and thanks to our guests, Commissioner Mark Stone and Deputy Director Luiz Mendez. I'm your host, George Dondero from Santa Cruz County RTC, and inviting you to join us for our next Transportation Cafe.
Do you or someone you know need specialized transportation services? Be a champ and get the Guide for Specialized Transportation Services for Seniors and People with Disabilities in Santa Cruz County. This guide is produced by the Santa Cruz County Regional Transportation Commission, or RTC. The guide contains information about 30 transportation service providers. The guide includes information about how to contact the service, who is eligible for services, the hours of operation, cost for the services, where service is provided, how to secure service, how trips are prioritized, the number and types of vehicles available, whether wheelchairs are accommodated, and whether Spanish is spoken. Remember, specialized transportation services help seniors and people with disabilities stay active, healthy, and avoid isolation. You can get the Guide for Specialized Transportation at senior centers, the DMV, and most local libraries. You can also get your own copy by calling the RTC at 831-460-3200. The guide's also available on our website. Log on to www.sccrtc.org. Be a champ. Get the guide. My name is Karena Pushik, and I'm a Senior Transportation Planner at the Santa Cruz County Regional Transportation Commission, or RTC. In the last episode of the RTC's Transportation Cafe on bicycle and pedestrian projects, we highlighted a number of issues, programs, and projects in our county. There are a couple of updates that I thought you might want to know about. The first is that the Pedestrian Safety Work Group has produced a report called Improving the Safety and Accessibility of Sidewalks in Santa Cruz County, a study of jurisdiction and property owner responsibilities and practices. This report provides an assessment of local sidewalk facilities in all 5 local jurisdictions. In addition, the report talks about standards, what constitutes safe sidewalks, and information about local laws governing who's responsible for maintaining sidewalks adjacent to private property. The The second update is about Bike to Work Day. Bike to Work Week is coming up in May. It's May 9th through the 16th, and the Regional Transportation Commission is the major sponsor of this event. Bike to Work Day itself is May 12th, and there will be many activities out in the community, including free breakfast sites at many schools and other sites around the county. So tune up your bike, get out there, and check the Bike to Work site or the Regional Transportation Commission site for more information. If you have topic ideas for our Regional Transportation Commission Transportation Cafe, please email them to us. The email is at the bottom of the screen. Thank you.